Woman shelters stranger during flood without imagining what was to come. He arrived injured, wet and silent, and she didn't hesitate to help him. In the days that followed, everything changed. Her daughter became attached. He began to stay. When he left a void she never expected to feel. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The dirty water invaded everything, carrying with it the debris of entire lives. Sarah held Emily's hand firmly, her 6-year-old daughter, while walking on the boards she had managed to secure above the flood level. The deafening noise of the rain mixed with her own thoughts, which fought against despair. It had been raining for 3 days, and what started as a common storm had turned into a calamity that swallowed half the city. The small shelter that Sarah built in the last few hours was the result of her determination and the few materials she managed to save before the water completely invaded her house. Some old boards, plastic tarp, ropes she found floating, and a lot of creativity born from necessity. There, on top of that improvised structure, mother and daughter shared a space of 2 square meters with their most essential belongings. Some dry clothes wrapped in plastic bags, a pot, 2 aluminum plates, and a small Bible that Sarah had carried since childhood. Emily was drawing with crayons on a piece of cardboard, focused on creating a colorful world that contrasted with the gray reality around her. From time to time, she looked up at her mother and smiled, as if to say that everything was okay, that they could face anything together. Sarah felt her heart tighten when she saw that strength in her daughter, a courage that she herself sometimes doubted she possessed. The different sound caught her attention. It was no longer just the rain hitting the tarp or the noise of water running through the streets. It was a low moan, almost imperceptible, coming from the direction opposite to the wind. Sarah stretched her neck, trying to see through the curtain of rain. There was something moving there near the streetlight that still worked, creating a yellowish halo in the darkness of the afternoon. "Mommy, what's that?" Emily had stopped drawing and was pointing in the same direction her mother was watching. Sarah felt a chill. It could just be debris brought by the current, but something in her maternal instinct told her it wasn't. "Stay here, my love. Don't leave here for anything, okay?" Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead and carefully descended from the improvised platform. The cold water rose to her knees, soaking the hem of her pants that she had managed to keep dry again. Each step was a struggle against the current that tried to unbalance her. As she approached, the figure became clearer. It was a man, apparently unconscious, half sunken in the mud that the water had brought from the riverbanks. His clothes, even wet and dirty, betrayed a completely different origin from hers. Dark suit of good fabric, genuine leather shoes, and a watch that shone even in the rain. He had a cut on his left eyebrow, from which a trickle of blood mixed with rainwater flowed. Sarah hesitated for a moment. She didn't know this man, didn't know where he came from or how he had ended up there, but the same inner voice that guided her in caring for Emily whispered that she couldn't simply pass him by. She approached closer and gently touched his shoulder. "Hey, sir, can you hear me?" The man moaned softly and tried to open his eyes, but consciousness was still distant. Sarah looked around, calculating the possibilities. He was taller and certainly heavier than her, but she couldn't leave him there. The water continued to rise, and in a few hours that place would be completely submerged. With superhuman effort, she managed to drag the man to the shelter. Emily watched her with wide eyes, mixing curiosity and concern. Sarah improvised a space for him at one end of the platform, using one of the blankets she reserved for emergencies. "Mommy, is he okay?" The little girl approached cautiously, extending her small hand to touch the stranger's face. Sarah gently held her daughter's hand. "He's hurt, Em. We'll take care of him until he gets better, okay?" The girl nodded seriously, as if she perfectly understood the responsibility they had just assumed. The following hours were ones of vigilance. Sarah cleaned the man's wound with rainwater and a clean piece of cloth, applied some alcohol she kept in her first aid kit, and covered the cut with an improvised bandage. He breathed irregularly but steadily. From time to time he muttered incomprehensible words, names that Sarah couldn't decipher. Night arrived, bringing a damp cold that penetrated to the bone. Sarah divided her blankets among the three, keeping Emily in the middle between her and the stranger. The girl fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day of tension. Sarah, however, remained awake, watching the man and praying quietly for his improvement. It was almost at dawn when he opened his eyes for the first time. Confused, he tried to get up quickly, but the sudden movement made him groan in pain and bring his hand to his injured head. His eyes scanned the environment, trying to understand where he was and how he had gotten there. Calmly, Sarah approached, keeping her hands visible to reassure him. "You're safe. You had an accident, but you're better now. I'm Sarah, and this is my daughter, Emily." The man stared at her with distrust, his brown eyes revealing a mixture of confusion and irritation. Where are we?" His voice came out hoarse, loaded with authority even in the fragility of the moment. "In a temporary shelter. The flood hit this entire region. You were lying down there. I brought you here." Sarah pointed to the water that continued to run through the streets, a few centimeters lower than the night before, but still dangerous. He tried to sit up, looking around with increasing disbelief. The precarious structure, the simple objects, the meticulous organization of the little they had. All of it seemed like a nightmare from which he expected to wake up at any moment. "I need to get out of here. I need to—" He tried to stand up again, but Sarah stopped him with a firm gesture. "You can't go anywhere right now. The water is still high and you need to recover. Besides, you have nowhere to go. Look outside." For the first time, he really observed the devastation around them. Submerged cars, fallen poles, debris floating in the dark current. The world he knew had disappeared under the waters, leaving only that raw and immediate reality. Emily woke up with the voices and, seeing the man conscious, smiled shyly. "Good morning, sir. Are you feeling better?" He observed her for a long moment, as if he had never seen a child before. There was something in the innocence of that smile that completely disconcerted him. I'm better, yes." Sarah served a warm broth that she had prepared with the few ingredients available. The man accepted reluctantly, expecting her to serve him, but soon realized that the rules were different there. Each one took care of themselves, each one contributed what they could. During the day, he observed the dynamics of that small universe. Sarah woke up early, organized the space, prepared meals, took care of her daughter, and still found time to check on him. Emily helped where she could, arranging her drawings, washing dishes with rainwater, telling stories to entertain everyone. There was no waste, no unnecessary rush, no lamentations about what they had lost. There was only life happening, minute by minute, with a simplicity that he had never experienced. In the afternoon, when the rain gave a truce, Sarah went down to check the water level and look for some dry branches that could serve as fuel. The man was left alone with Emily, who continued drawing on her piece of cardboard. "You draw well," he said, surprising himself with his own kindness. The girl looked up, radiant with the compliment. "Thank you. Would you like me to draw you?" He hesitated, but something in the child's enthusiasm made him nod positively. Emily began to trace lines with concentration, stopping from time to time to observe him, and then return to the drawing. "What's your name?" she asked without raising her eyes from the paper. "It's Michael." He almost said just his last name, as he was accustomed to, but something made him offer his first name. "Michael is a nice name. My mom says nice names are for people who are beautiful inside." The innocence of the statement hit him like a punch. How long had it been since someone referred to him that way? When Sarah returned, she found Michael watching Emily finish the drawing. There was something different in his expression, a softness that wasn't there in the morning. "Look, Mommy, I made a drawing of Michael." The girl proudly showed her work. It was a simple drawing, as any child would make, but it had captured something essential. A man with sad but kind eyes. Michael looked at the drawing and then at Sarah, who smiled discreetly. At that moment, something inside him began to move, like an old door being opened after being closed for a long time. He didn't yet know what it meant, but he knew that something had changed forever. The following days brought a routine that Michael had never imagined possible. Sarah woke up before the sun and methodically organized every inch of the shelter. There was a place for everything, a function for every moment. She divided the tasks in a practical way, collecting rainwater for drinking and washing, checking the structure of the shelter, preparing meals with the little they had, keeping Emily busy and clean. Michael expected to be included in that organization as a guest, someone who should be served while recovering, but Sarah had other expectations. On the third day, when he extended his hand expecting to receive the ready-made food plate, she simply said, "The pot is over there, Michael. Help yourself." The simplicity of the phrase carried a weight that took him time to understand. It wasn't discourtesy or coldness. It was the basic rule of that small world. Everyone contributed, everyone participated. There were no privileges based on status or previous condition. During the first week, Michael struggled internally against that new reality. He was accustomed to having assistants, drivers, employees who anticipated his needs even before he expressed them. There he needed to wash his own plate, fold his own blanket, contribute to the cleanliness of the common space. Emily observed everything with the natural perspicacity of children. She perceived his resistance, but also noticed the small advances. On the fourth day, he helped Sarah reposition a board that had come loose during the night. On the fifth, he offered to look for dry twigs when she mentioned they needed more fuel. The girl had the habit of writing small notes, using pieces of paper she had saved from her school notebooks. Initially, she wrote only to her mother, small messages of affection or drawings accompanied by simple words. But gradually, she began to include Michael in her silent correspondence. The first note he found was under the blanket, written in childish handwriting with some spelling errors. "Michael, thank you for helping my mom with the board. You are kind." Signed with a small heart drawn in pencil. He held the paper for several minutes, rereading the simple words that carried a sincerity he hadn't received in years. In the corporate world, compliments came loaded with ulterior motives, with hidden interests. There, a 6-year-old child simply recognized a gesture of kindness. Sarah noticed the gradual change in Michael, but maintained a respectful distance. There was something in his posture, in the way he observed everything with analytical eyes, that made her suspect that his previous life was very different from theirs. She didn't ask direct questions, respecting the privacy that he clearly valued, but observed. One afternoon, when the rain temporarily decreased, Michael decided to explore the surroundings of the shelter. The water had dropped a few centimeters, revealing more debris and the real extent of the devastation. Walking carefully through the still flooded streets, he tried to recognize geographical references that would help him locate himself. That's when he found his car. The black BMW was partially submerged, with broken windows and the interior completely soaked. In the back seat, floating in dirty water, were documents, important papers from meetings that seemed to have happened in another life. He managed to recover his wallet, miraculously still attached to the glove compartment. The discovery brought back memories that he had managed to keep distant during those days. He remembered the last meeting before the storm, the discussions about astronomical figures, the expansion plans that now seemed irrelevant. He also remembered why he was driving alone in that region of the city, something he normally avoided. He had received a call about a construction project in an area that would benefit from the City Hall's social programs. He wanted to personally see the land, evaluate the potential for appreciation. It was a cold, calculated business decision that aimed for maximum profit with minimum investment. The irony of having been rescued precisely by people who would be affected by his business decisions did not go unnoticed. When he returned to the shelter, Sarah and Emily were preparing dinner. The girl ran to meet him, happy to see him back. "I was worried, Michael. Where did you go?" The genuine concern in her voice touched him in an unexpected way. How long had it been since someone really cared about his well-being, without commercial interest behind it? "I went to check some things down there. I'm back now." Sarah noticed that he brought the wallet in his hands but made no comments. She just said, "Dinner is almost ready. Today I got some vegetables that were floating nearby. They're still good." During the meal, Michael observed mother and daughter talking about plans for when the water completely receded. Sarah talked about finding a new place to live, about getting a job, about ensuring that Emily could return to school. There were no lamentations about what they had lost, only practical planning for the future. "Don't you have family in other places?" The question came out before he could censor himself. Sarah looked at him for a moment before answering, "It's just the two of us for a long time. And you, Michael? Do you have family worrying?" The reverse question caught him off guard. He had employees, partners, business contacts, but family, in the real sense of the word, people who would worry about his well-being regardless of financial issues, he hadn't had for years. "Not exactly," he answered with honesty. Sarah nodded, as if she perfectly understood what those words meant. That night, Michael remained awake for hours, observing the stars that appeared in the intervals between the clouds. Beside him, Emily slept deeply, occasionally snuggling closer to him, as if it were natural. Sarah slept in constant vigilance, waking at the slightest noise or movement from her daughter. He thought about the wallet he had recovered, the credit cards that could solve many practical problems, the cell phone that had certainly been replaced by assistance after a few days without contact. He could, theoretically, quickly resolve his situation, return to the previous world. But something kept him there. It wasn't just the physical recovery, which was already practically complete. It was something deeper, a curiosity about that way of living that challenged everything he believed about basic human needs. The next morning, Emily left another note for him. This one was longer, written with childish care. Michael, you get sad sometimes when you look far away. My mom said good people sometimes get sad because they think about difficult things. You are a good person. When you smile, I feel happy too. Signed with a drawing of a sun. He carefully folded the paper and kept it with the first one. For the first time in years, someone had noticed his sadness and cared enough to try to console him. A 6-year-old child had shown more empathy than colleagues from decades of work. Sarah found him reading the notes and smiled discreetly. She writes to you because she trusts you. For Em, this is very important. She doesn't do this with just anyone. The realization made him reflect on the privilege he was receiving. That child's trust was priceless, couldn't be bought or negotiated. It was freely offered, based only on the childish perception of kindness and safety. During breakfast, Michael made a decision. Sarah, I want to contribute more to the expenses here. I have some resources that can help. She interrupted him before he could continue. Michael, it doesn't work like that here. Each one contributes what they can, when they can. You're already contributing. Yesterday you helped fix the cover the day before you brought firewood. That has value. But I could... She raised her hand, interrupting him again. Could what? Buy our gratitude. Pay to feel better. That's not how things work here. The tone wasn't hostile, but firm. Michael realized he had touched on something sensitive. Emily observed the conversation attentively, her large eyes going from one adult to the other. Sensing the tension in the air, she approached Michael and held his hand. Mommy isn't mad at you. She just doesn't like when people think money solves everything. The childish wisdom corrected his perception. Sarah wasn't rejecting his help out of pride, but on principle. In that small world, relationships were based on human reciprocity, not financial transactions. Michael nodded slowly, understanding the lesson. I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm still learning the rules here. She smiled for the first time since the beginning of the conversation. They're not rules, Michael. It's just a different way of living. And you're learning well. The discreet compliment warmed him inside in a way he hadn't experienced in a long time. The second week brought visible changes in the water level. The streets were beginning to appear again, revealing the full extent of the damage caused by the flood. Michael observed the transformation of the landscape with contradictory feelings. On one hand, it meant they could soon leave that improvised shelter. On the other, it represented the end of an experience that had deeply marked him. Sarah began to go out more frequently to explore the surroundings, checking what resources would be available when they could move. She left Emily under Michael's care, a demonstration of trust that didn't go unnoticed. During these absences, he and the girl developed their own routine. Emily had the habit of asking direct questions with the natural curiosity of children. Michael, have you ever been a father? The question arose while she was drawing without raising her eyes from the paper. No, Em. I've never been a father. The answer came automatically, but the question awakened reflections that he preferred to avoid. He had had opportunities, relationships that could have evolved into something more serious, but he had always prioritized his career, business, the construction of a financial empire that now seemed empty. Would you like to be? She continued drawing, as if the question were about the weather or the color of the sky. Michael took a while to respond. Before the experience in that shelter, he would have said no without hesitation. Children represented responsibilities, limitations, complications that wouldn't fit in his structured life. But observing Emily in recent days, seeing her ability to find joy in the simplest things, her natural generosity, her way of seeing kindness where others saw only need, his perspective had changed. Maybe, if I were as good a father as your mother is a mother. The girl finally looked up, smiling with a wisdom that seemed beyond her 6 years. You would be a good father, Michael. You take care of people. The categorical statement surprised him. What did she base that certainty on? How do you know that, Em? She pointed to small gestures that he didn't even realize he made, how he adjusted her blanket during the night when he felt she was cold, how he always checked if she had eaten enough before serving himself, how he listened attentively to her stories, even the most repetitive ones. Daddies care like that. I didn't have one, but I know how it should be. The simplicity of the observation hit him like lightning. A child who never had a father had identified in him paternal qualities that he himself didn't know he possessed. That afternoon, while Sarah was still out and Emily was taking her usual nap, Michael found himself alone with his thoughts for the first time in weeks. The silence, broken only by the sound of water running in the streets, brought back memories that he had buried for years. He had also lost his father early, not by abandonment as he imagined was Emily's case, but in traumatic circumstances that shaped his entire adult life. He was only 12 when a similar flood devastated the city where he lived with his parents. The family had taken refuge on the second floor of their house, waiting for the water to recede. But the structure didn't hold. His father had gone down to the ground floor to recover important documents, valuable objects that could help them start over. The house partially collapsed and he was trapped in the rubble. Michael and his mother heard his screams for hours, powerless to help, until silence took over. That experience had created in him an obsession with control, financial security, the ability to solve any problem with money. He built a business empire based on the fear of finding himself again in a situation of vulnerability. He avoided deep emotional involvements, maintained superficial relationships, surrounded himself with loyal but distant employees. Now, at 42, he found himself exactly in the situation he had spent his life trying to avoid. Dependent on the kindness of strangers, without control over the circumstances, vulnerable in every possible way. And paradoxically, he felt more alive than in decades. When Sarah returned, she found Michael visibly disturbed. His eyes revealed an anguish that she had already noticed in moments of reflection, but which now seemed more intense. "Michael, are you okay?" She approached with the delicacy of someone who perceives that someone is dealing with deep issues. He hesitated before answering. For weeks he had kept his past a secret, allowing Sarah and Emily to create their own theories about who he was. But something in the sincerity of her concern made him want to share. "Sarah, can I tell you something?" She nodded, sitting next to him on the small wooden platform. Michael started slowly reporting the tragedy of his childhood. He talked about the father he lost, about the fear that experience created, about how he spent his life building barriers against vulnerability. Sarah listened in silence, occasionally nodding, without interrupting or judging. When he finished, she remained quiet for a few minutes, processing what she had heard. Finally, she spoke. It must have been very difficult to carry this alone for so long. The simple understanding, without unsolicited advice or attempts to minimize his pain, comforted him more than any expensive therapy he had tried over the years. "You know what's strange?" continued Michael. "I'm living exactly the scenario I fear most, and for the first time in decades I feel at peace." Sarah smiled softly. "Sometimes facing our fears is the only way to discover that we are stronger than we imagined." That night, Emily left another note for Michael. It was written with more care than the previous ones, as if she had sensed that he needed special words. "Michael, my mum said you got sad today because you remembered difficult things. I get sad sometimes when I think about my dad, who I never knew. But my mum says sadness divides when we talk about it. You can talk to me whenever you want. I'm good at keeping secrets and giving hugs." Michael read the note several times, moved by the emotional maturity of the child. She had intuited his need for consolation and offered the best she had, her presence and understanding. The next day, during breakfast, Michael made a decision that surprised him. "Sarah, would you like to see where I work when we leave here?" Sarah looked at him curiously. "Where do you work?" "I have a construction and real estate development company. Buildings, condominiums, urban projects." The revelation caused a subtle change in Sarah's expression, an almost imperceptible rigidity that Michael immediately noticed. "What kind of projects?" The question carried a caution that wasn't present in previous conversations. Michael realized he had reached a crucial point. He could continue being vague, maintaining the romanticized version of himself that he had allowed them to create, or he could be completely honest, Projects that aim for maximum profit with minimum investment. I buy land in areas that I know will be valued, build developments for higher classes, contribute to gentrification processes that expel families like yours from their original neighborhoods. The brutal honesty created an uncomfortable silence. Emily, without completely understanding the implications, continued eating, but Sarah had stopped feeding herself. Why are you telling me this? Sarah's question was direct, without hostility, but loaded with a new distance. Because you deserve to know who I really am, and because I'm beginning to question if I want to continue being that person. Michael kept his gaze fixed on Sarah, waiting for her reaction. She reflected for several minutes before responding. Michael, what you did before doesn't change who you are here now. But tell me one thing. Did you come to this region on the day of the flood for work? The question was a double-edged sword. Michael could lie, maintain the illusion that his presence there had been accidental, or he could complete his confession. I came to evaluate land for purchase. I wanted to build a luxury condominium in the area that would benefit from the new social programs. The irony of the situation hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Sarah nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion she had already formulated. Then our current situation is, in a way, the result of decisions made by people like you. Michael felt the weight of the accusation, even expressed without anger. Yes, and that shames me more than anything I've ever done in my life. Emily, sensing the tension between the adults, approached Michael and held his hand. You're not going to do things that leave people without homes anymore, right, Michael? The childish question perfectly encapsulated the dilemma he faced. He could return to his previous life, continue building his fortune on others' vulnerability, or he could choose a different path. No, Em, I'm not going to do that anymore. The promise came out with a conviction that surprised him. Sarah observed him for a long moment, as if trying to assess the sincerity of his words. We hope it's true, Michael. For you, more than for us. The water had receded enough for them to leave the improvised shelter. Sarah spent the last days organizing a move to a temporary shelter, managed by the city hall, where they could stay until finding a new permanent home. Michael observed the preparations with a tightness in his chest that he couldn't explain. On the morning of departure, while Sarah folded the last clothes and Emily saved her drawings, a man in a suit appeared walking through the still, wet street. Michael recognized him immediately. It was Dave, his personal assistant for more than 10 years. Mr. Reynolds, thank God we found you. Dave seemed genuinely relieved, but his eyes scanned the improvised environment with poorly disguised horror. We've been looking for you for weeks. Everyone was worried. Michael felt the brutal contrast between the two worlds. Dave represented his previous life, impeccable suits, cold efficiency, relationships based on hierarchy and utility. Sarah and Emily represented something he was still learning to name: genuine human connection, meaningful simplicity, unconditional love. Dave, how did you find me? Michael kept his voice controlled, aware that Sarah and Emily were observing the interaction. There's a location chip in your watch, sir. When the region became accessible again, we were able to track the signal. Dave extended a suitcase of clean clothes and a cell phone. I brought everything you'll need to return to normality. The word normality echoed strangely for Michael. His previous life now seemed anything but normal. Sarah approached with Emily at her side, clearly preparing to say goodbye. Michael, it was very good to meet you. We hope you find what you're looking for. The formality in the farewell hurt him. In recent weeks, Sarah had become closer than anyone in his adult life, and now she treated him like a casual acquaintance. Sarah, wait. It doesn't have to be like this. He addressed Dave without taking his eyes off her. Dave, can you give us a moment? Of course, sir, but we have an emergency meeting in 2 hours. The investors are... Michael interrupted him with a gesture. Later, Dave. Later. The assistant moved away, clearly uncomfortable with the environment and the situation. Michael knelt to be at Emily's height. Em, these last days were the best of my life. You taught me things I didn't know I needed to learn. The girl hugged him tightly. Will you visit us, Michael? The simple question carried so much weight. Visiting implied maintaining contact, creating lasting bonds with people from a completely different world than his. His answer would define the kind of man he would choose to be from then on. Yes, I will, and you will visit me too. You will. I have a big house too empty for just one person. The promise came out before he could analyze it rationally. Sarah interrupted him. Michael, you don't need to make promises out of politeness. We know our lives are very different. They're not promises out of politeness, Sarah. They're promises because... Michael stopped, looking for words to express feelings that he himself didn't completely understand. Because you saved me. Not just pulled me out of the water. You saved me from a life that was killing me inside. Dave impatiently cleared his throat in the distance, ostensibly looking at his watch. Sarah noticed the gesture and sighed. Michael, you have a life waiting. Responsibilities, people who depend on you. You can't simply abandon all of that. What if I can? What if I want to? The intensity of the question surprised everyone, including Michael himself. During the following days, Michael tried to resume his previous routine. He returned to his penthouse apartment with a view of the city and complete isolation from others' problems. He participated in meetings about investments, signed contracts, approved projects that months before excited him. But something fundamental had changed. During meetings, he found himself thinking about the families that would be displaced by the new developments. At meals in expensive restaurants, he remembered the special flavor of the broth that Sarah prepared with simple ingredients. On lonely nights in his king-size bed, he missed the comforting sound of Emily's breathing sleeping beside him. Dave noticed the change immediately. Mr. Reynolds, you seem different. Can I help with something? Michael observed him for a moment. Dave was efficient, loyal in his way, but there was a coldness in all his interactions that before seemed professional and now sounded inhuman. Dave, do you have a family? The personal question clearly made the assistant uncomfortable. I do, sir. Wife and 2 children. When was the last time you spent an entire day with them without thinking about work? Dave hesitated, clearly trying to remember. I don't know, sir. With the schedule always full. Michael interrupted him. Dave, I want you to take a week off. Paid, obviously. Go spend time with your family, it's an order. The assistant seemed confused, but nodded. After Dave left, Michael remained alone in his office, observing the city through the huge glass windows. Down there, people small as ants went about their lives, facing challenges that he had spent decades trying to ignore. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he had memorized during the experience at the shelter. Sarah answered after a few rings. Michael, did something happen? The immediate concern in her voice warmed him. Sarah, where are you now? Did you find a decent place? We're in a city hall shelter. It's temporary, but it's good. Emily is making new friends. The diplomatically positive response didn't fool him. Can you send me the address? I want to make that visit I promised. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Michael, are you sure? It's a very different environment than what you're used to. Her concern was with his comfort, not with judgments he might make. I'm sure, Sarah, very sure. The municipal shelter was exactly what Michael expected. Functional, clean but devoid of any personality or emotional comfort. Dozens of families shared common spaces, each trying to maintain their dignity in challenging circumstances. Michael found Sarah and Emily in a small dormitory they shared with 2 other families. Emily ran to meet him, radiant with joy. Michael, you really came. She hugged him with the strength of someone who had genuinely missed him. Sarah smiled, but he noticed there was something different in her posture, a rigidity that wasn't present in the improvised shelter. During the visit, Michael realized that Sarah was deliberately keeping distance. She answered his questions politely, but without the intimacy they had developed. It was as if she had erected an invisible barrier between them. When Emily moved away to play with other children, Michael addressed the issue directly. Sarah, did I do something wrong? You seem different. She sighed, as if she had been expecting that question. Michael, it's not anything you did. It's just difficult. Difficult how? He approached, trying to understand. You came here today driving a car that costs more than I'll earn in 5 years. You're wearing clothes that cost more than our monthly rent when we had our own home. Sarah paused, carefully choosing her words. I'm not criticizing you for having these things. I'm just recognizing that we live in very different worlds. Michael felt his heart tighten. But that doesn't mean we can't try to build a bridge between these worlds. Sarah looked at him with a sadness that broke him. Michael, you're a good person. I discovered that in the days we spent together. But you'll go back to your life, your responsibilities, your business decisions, and we'll continue here dealing with the consequences of those decisions. What if I don't go back? What if I choose to stay? The question came out as a desperate whisper. You can't give up who you are for us, Michael. It wouldn't be fair or sustainable. Sarah gently touched his arm. But you can choose to be a better version of who you are. That night, Michael returned to the apartment with his mind in turmoil. Sarah's words echoed in his thoughts, challenging him to find a middle ground between the two worlds he had experienced. The next morning, he made a decision that would change the course of his life. He called an extraordinary meeting with all the partners of the company. Gentlemen, I want to announce a change of direction in our company. From today, we're going to focus on affordable housing projects and sustainable social development. The statement caused an astonished silence in the meeting room. Michael, this is financially unviable, protested one of the oldest partners. Our investors expect high returns. Affordable housing doesn't generate the necessary profits. Then maybe it's time to find new investors or to redefine what we consider adequate return. Michael kept his voice firm, anticipating the resistance. The meeting extended for hours, with heated discussions about financial viability, responsibilities to shareholders, and Michael's mental sanity. In the end, two partners decided to withdraw from the partnership, taking with them a significant part of the capital. Michael wasn't shaken. For the first time in decades, he was making decisions based on values, not just numbers. During the following weeks, he completely restructured the company, focusing on projects that would benefit needy communities. He developed a program to build affordable houses in areas affected by floods, incorporating advanced drainage systems and resistant structures. A month later, he returned to the municipal shelter with a concrete proposal. Sarah, I want to build houses for the families affected by the flood. Dignified houses with adequate infrastructure in safe locations. I want you to coordinate the project, identifying the families who need it most. Sarah observed him with skepticism. Michael, this sounds very beautiful, but what's the financial return for you? The return is being able to sleep in peace, knowing that I'm using my resources to build, not to destroy. The return is seeing Emily grow up in a safe place. The return is having you and her as part of my life. The raw honesty of the response broke the barriers that Sarah had erected. She hugged him for the first time since they had met again. Emily, who had heard the conversation, ran to join the hug. Are we going to have a real house, Mommy? We are, my love. We're going to have a real house. 2 years later, Michael walked through the first village built by the project. Colorful houses, paved streets, a school in the center of the community. Children played in the gardens while adults chatted on the porches. Sarah appeared at his side, carrying plants for the community garden they were developing. Emily ran after a butterfly, laughing loudly. Do you regret anything? Sarah asked, observing the happy bustle around. Michael reflected for a moment. I lost a lot of money, some friends who were actually just business contacts, and the simplicity of making decisions based only on profit. And does that bother you? She approached, holding his hand. No. I gained something much more valuable in return. I gained a family. I gained a purpose. I gained the possibility of looking in the mirror and liking the man I see reflected. Emily came back running, holding a flower she had picked. For you, Michael, it's to celebrate our new home. Michael took the flower, moved. Even after 2 years, the simple gestures of affection from the girl still touched him deeply. Thank you, Em. It's the most beautiful flower I've ever received. That night, sitting on the porch of their new home, Michael, Sarah, and Emily watched the stars. The girl had fallen asleep in Michael's lap, who held her with the care of an experienced father. Sarah, can I ask you a question? Michael spoke softly so as not to wake Emily. Sure. Do you believe people can really change, or do they just learn to better disguise who they always were? Sarah observed him for a long moment before answering. I think you answered your own question in the last 2 years. You didn't disguise anything. You chose to be the person you always had the potential to be. Michael nodded, looking at the daughter he had gained not through blood, but through the daily choice to love and care. Emily had officially become his adopted daughter 6 months earlier, a process that Sarah fully supported. You know what impresses me most about this whole story, Michael continued. It's how a flood, which seemed like the end of everything, was actually the beginning of a life I didn't even know I wanted. Sarah smiled, snuggling closer to him. Sometimes we need to lose everything to discover what really matters. Michael kissed the top of Emily's head, who murmured something incomprehensible and snuggled more in his arms. Then he kissed Sarah, a soft kiss that carried all the love he had learned to feel and express. As they watched the stars, Michael reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. A storm that could have been a tragedy transformed into rebirth. A flood that could have separated families ended up creating a new family, united not by circumstances, but by the conscious choice to love and care for each other. The man who had been rescued from the water was no longer the same who now held his daughter in his arms. That Michael had been carried away by the current, along with his cynicism, his isolation, and his search for meaning in empty places. In his place, a man capable of unconditional love, genuine purpose, and the deep understanding that true wealth is measured in human connections, not bank figures, had emerged. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Michael, Sarah, and Emily has touched your hearts in the same way it touched ours. This narrative about second chances, personal transformation, and the power of unconditional love reminds us that even in the most difficult situations, there is always hope to start over and choose to be a better version of ourselves. If this story awakened emotions in you, we would very much like to know your reflections in the comments below. Have you experienced moments that completely transformed you? Have you met people who changed your perspective on life? Share these experiences with us, as each personal story enriches our community of listeners. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive all our exciting narratives. Leave a like if this story resonated in your hearts, and activate the bell to not miss any of the stories we prepare especially for you. Every day, we bring content that explores the complexity and beauty of the human experience. Until the next story, and remember, it's never too late to choose love.